What if I told you that behind the doors of a posh house in a quiet Noida neighborhood, a nightmare was unfolding that would shake the entire nation? A story so gruesome, so disturbing, that it forced India to stare into the face of evil. This is the horrifying truth of the Nithari killings. It all began in the calm residential colony of Nithari, located in Noida's Sector 31, where the air was filled with the usual sounds of city life. Children playing, vendors shouting, families living their everyday routines, until something started to change. Kids began disappearing, one by one. Between 2005 and 2006, over 16 children and women vanished mysteriously from the slum areas near Nithari, and despite the cries of desperate parents and the growing fear among residents, the authorities remained shockingly silent, labeling the cases as routine runaways. All eyes turned toward a white-walled house, D5, owned by a wealthy businessman named Moninder Singh Pandher, who lived there with his domestic help, Surinder Kohli, and what lay beyond those walls would later haunt the nation forever. It was only when the father of a missing girl, along with other grieving families, took matters into their own hands and pushed the police to act that the real horror was uncovered, because on December 29, 2006, during a routine investigation at the servant quarters of House D5, police found something unimaginable. Human remains buried in a drain. Bones, skulls, body parts, packed in plastic bags, buried in the backyard, hidden in the drain outside, a sight straight out of a horror film, but this was real. And the number kept rising as investigators kept digging. Skulls of children, pieces of flesh, torn clothing, tiny slippers. When questioned, Surinder Kohli confessed to the killings in chilling detail, claiming he lured the children into the house, strangled them, raped the corpses, chopped the bodies into pieces, and then either buried them or dumped the remains in the nearby drain. Cold, calculated, and utterly remorseless. Kohli was arrested and charged with rape, murder, cannibalism, and necrophilia, while Pandher claimed he had no knowledge of the crimes taking place under his roof, a claim many still find hard to believe given the scale of the horror happening in his home. The Nithari case exploded across media, drawing nationwide outrage, triggering debates about police negligence, corruption, and the shocking vulnerability of the poor, because many victims came from marginalized families whose voices were ignored for far too long. Citizens took to the streets, demanding justice, transparency, and reforms, as the case exposed the deep rot within law enforcement and a justice system that had allowed such a monstrosity to exist unnoticed, in plain sight. In 2009, Kohli was convicted and sentenced to death in multiple cases, a sentence that was later upheld by the Supreme Court, while Pandher too faced charges and was convicted in some cases, but acquitted in others, sparking fresh controversy and public outrage over his alleged involvement. But for the families, no court order or jail sentence could ever heal the wounds. They were left with memories, pain, and photographs of children who never came home, with questions that may never be fully answered. So how did this happen? How could so many lives be lost before anyone acted? The answer lies in a dark mix of poverty, apathy, systemic failure, and a monster hiding in plain sight. The Nithari case wasn't just about one killer. It was about a system that refused to see until it was far too late. Years later, the legal battles continue. In December 2023, both Kohli and Pandher were acquitted in 12 of the 16 cases by the Allahabad High Court due to lack of evidence despite earlier death sentences, leaving the nation once again in disbelief and the families in mourning all over again. Behind every shocking headline, there are unheard cries, forgotten faces, and stolen futures. The Nithari case reminds us that evil often wears an ordinary mask, and sometimes justice takes too long to knock. In memory of the innocent lives lost in Nithari, may we never forget. May we always fight for justice. If this story moved you, share it, because silence protects monsters and truth, however horrifying, is the only way to light the darkness.